howdy. Tom and Jerry. They're essentially the founding grandfathers of animated slapstick comedy, thanks to their classic skits from the 40s. Back in the day, they set the gold standard for animated comedy timing. This has essentially given them a permanent legendary status. In fact, internationally, Tom and Jerry is the most popular cartoon in the world. But in more recent times, Warner Brothers hasn't been shy on capitalizing on the cat and mouse duo's legendary status.
In an all-new original movie.
In fact, in recent decades, there has been a tidal wave of random Tom and Jerry movies.
Get ready for an all-new original movie.
And while some are sell-out trash can incineration piles that smell like old boots, there are others that really try to be created with a limited budget, limited time, and definitely a limited scope of what they're allowed to do. But Joseph Barbera himself actually stepped in to write a couple of these really good Tom and Jerry movies, and it shows. In fact, the final one he wrote a year before he died. That is dedication to your craft, sir. My respects. So today, let's check out the top 5 best and worst Tom and Jerry movies. Just a heads up that the Tom and Jerry movies are particularly subjective. There's surprisingly few unanimous opinions on these movies, so take this list with an extra pinch of salt. Anyway, on to the countdown. The 5th worst Tom and Jerry movie is Shiver Me Whiskers. This seems to be a Tom and Jerry movie that is quite comfortable with just existing and not doing much else. In fact, it really does nothing different or memorable whatsoever. And how that is possible in a setting as lush and beautiful as the pirate ship or the tropical island setting is beyond me. I mean, the Tom and Jerry action scenes are just tedious. I mean, look at this one. It's like watching a robot pedal forward on a treadmill. The animation just feels soulless. I mean, sure, the animation is seamless, but it's pretty clear a 2D rendition program just churned it out, making for some pretty dreary, if serviceable, scenes. You may not necessarily be able to pick up why the animation's dull,
but your brain did.
But the saturation levels do feel more toned down and balanced than, say, Tom and Jerry Willy Wonka. And there are a couple of pluses to this one. For one, it's not just shoehorning in some popular names to try and sell its title, while sidelining Tom and Jerry. Even if their skits are stripped of good timing and satisfaction, at least it's technically an original movie. I also have a personal fondness for the tropical island setting. I also don't remember hearing any songs, which I appreciated. They even keep the exposition quick and focus on the lackluster action. Overall, I found myself looking at my watch a lot for this one. It might be okay background music and it's pretty inoffensive, but personally, I consider this one of the lousier Tom and Jerry movies. And the 5th best Tom and Jerry movie is Tom and Jerry's The Nutcracker Tale. This is probably the closest I've ever seen to Mr. Barbera doing an equivalent to Fantasia, with that personal Hanna-Barbera touch. The Nutcracker skits actually work. They're funny, they're fast, they get the comedy timing right. The Nutcracker music kind of works in harmony with the Tom and Jerry skits. A surprisingly artistic, similar style to Fantasia. The animation itself is also really colourful and memorable, but not too garish or obnoxious either. And there's barely any talking from even the minor characters. It almost solely relies on visual cues and body language, while pleasant Nutcracker music plays in the background. Nutcracker just immersed me in Tom and Jerry's antics. It feels like there was an honest, real effort to make this a memorable movie that everyone could enjoy. Tom and Jerry Nutcracker Tale reminds me of everything I enjoy about Tom and Jerry, and all that original charm of Hanna-Barbera. And for the 4th worst, Tom and Jerry the movie. I recognize this movie is pretty bad, but, well, to be honest, it's a guilty pleasure of mine. I grew up with this one. It's really nostalgic to me. It was probably the first Hanna-Barbera movie that I ever watched. So I'm gonna point out what is wrong with this movie while meekly defending it with my own nostalgic bias. Number 1. Yes, it is silly and unconventional that Tom and Jerry become friends. But I'm one of those weirdos who actually enjoys the novelty of seeing Tom and Jerry become friends. I've never seen that before. It's like how I'd probably be fascinated if Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner teamed up for an episode. I don't necessarily want to see it every movie, but it's a really cool novelty for one movie. Number 2. Yes, it does break the series' original formula by having Tom and Jerry talk, but I actually still find it really refreshing to hear them talk.
I'm Tom. I'm Jerry. You talked!
I personally like their voice actor choices. They feel really suitable. To me, it's unconventional and interesting to hear their verbal communications.
Hey!
Ah, sorry.
No, look!
And it doesn't feel like it takes away from my original vision of their characters. They talk exactly how I'd expect Tom and Jerry to talk. Number 3. Yes, it's a Tom and Jerry movie and the slapstick doesn't work very well, and it's not the primary focus of the movie for some reason. But seeing Tom and Jerry team up and go on an adventure together is a really interesting novelty. I've got plenty of other movies to see them chasing each other. What's wrong with seeing them just once work together? Number 4. Yes, the story with Aunt Fig, Robin, and her dad Indiana Jones is silly, and it doesn't make much sense. But at least it was trying to be original. Unlike Tom and Jerry meet Sherlock Holmes, Robin Hood, or Willy Wonka, I had no idea what to expect next year. This is actually an original movie.
An all-new original movie.
And for number 5, yes, a lot of the songs are really silly, but there are actually a couple I really like. Unlike some of the other movies, most of them are fast-paced and don't drag out too long. A lot of them have this nice, not too overbearing jazz tempo to them that I really enjoy. That Gangsta Cat song, for example.
We hate your ugly mug, this putrid place, the lousy, stinking human race.
Tom and Jerry also feel pretty naturally thrown from one situation to the next. Nothing felt too out of nowhere to me. And again, it's not a flimsy pretense to stick two popular subjects together just to make money, which feels like a lot of the movies after this are. I admit, Tom and Jerry the movie is silly and campy and has some really stupid scenes, but I personally still enjoy it. And for the 4th best, Tom and Jerry and the Magic Ring. This one has a lot of that traditional Tom and Jerry charm. It's a small detail, but once again, I really like the choices for Tom and Jerry's voice actors in this one. While the voices are mostly yelps and laughs, it feels in line with the characters. There was even one moment that had me laughing purely out of the charm of the characters and not because anything funny had been done. Like, look at this moment. Tom has finally caught Jerry, and Jerry just bursts into laughter. And eventually Tom ends up joining in laughing with them. And just watching them, I ended up laughing as well. The focus remains on Tom and Jerry's chasing skits as well, without too many diversions. In fact, the plot is kept pretty bare-bones simple. Tom is left in charge of a priceless magic ring by his wizard master. But it, of course, gets stuck on Jerry's head, who runs into the city with Tom in chase. I think this is one of the first movies to really capture the original look, timing, and feel of the original Tom and Jerry's 1950s skits. Even the animation style looks a bit more traditional and not that ultra-sharp modern style we get today. I would consider Tom and Jerry and the Magic Ring one of the best Tom and Jerry movies. And the 3rd worst Tom and Jerry movie is Tom and Jerry meet Sherlock Holmes. Oh joy! We're given a mediocre, lackluster version of Sherlock Holmes. Except this time, Jerry is Holmes' assistant. Woo!
Would you be a good little fellow and fetch us the latest copy of the Times?
So in fact, it's actually false advertising. Tom and Jerry don't meet Sherlock Holmes. Jerry apparently already knew the guy and had been working for him for years. And the slapstick in this one really is nothing to write home about. When a collision happens, it doesn't feel like there's any visceral satisfaction to it. Rather than trying to get the traditional Tom and Jerry timing right, a lot of the segments just seem to rely on Tom pulling silly faces. Every segment just seems to meander along at an uninteresting but utterly inoffensive pace. And this one definitely seems to be a case of the franchise's meeting purely for the sake of money and marketability. Sherlock and Watson do their case, while Tom and Jerry just sort of exist off screen doing random errands. Even Droopy's scenes don't feel right, and normally all he has to do is say his signature phrase to get me laughing.
Hello, all you happy people.
Overall, the slapstick felt bland, the characters felt forced, and I personally felt no investment in Watson and Holmes' mystery. Even Holmes reaching his epiphany at the end felt pretty rushed. But that being said, I've barely watched any detective movies beyond Basil the Great Mouse Detective and a Garfield special.
I like babes and bullets. And I look kinda neat in a trench coat.
So I might not be the best judge of Sherlock Holmes movies to begin with, but personally, I don't recommend this Tom and Jerry movie. And for the third best, Tom and Jerry, Santa's Little Helper. Oh, wonderful, a sappy Christmas special. I turned this movie on expecting to hate it. Also because it was among the lowest rated Tom and Jerry movies on all of IMDb. But I was honestly pleasantly surprised. It's just a good, solid, short movie with Tom and Jerry in their original silent roles, and with the comedy actually working again. It once again captures the original short's comedy timing, setup, and charm. I normally don't have much patience for Christmas specials, but I have to admit, I enjoyed this one. The usual ham-fisted Christmas morals are still there, but they're not too in-your-face or schmaltzy. Although you probably did notice, the visuals lack some of the grace and finesse of the later movies. But I actually didn't notice that much because I was enjoying the skits and comedy between Tom and Jerry. I mean, I still think Tuffy was given far too much screen time, as always, but he's not too annoying in this one. I got a surprising amount of laughs from Santa's Little Helper. It's just a very solid, cute, traditional Tom and Jerry movie. And the second worst Tom and Jerry movie is Tom and Jerry and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Oh, come on. For one, that's not even a grammatically acceptable title. But I've discussed this one before in Worst and Best Book-Based Animated Movies, so I'll try and keep it brief. Did you ever see the classic 70s movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory? Well, congratulations! You've now seen Tom and Jerry Willy Wonka. I mean, this movie wrote the book on shoehorning this cat and mouse duo into whatever franchise is gonna make money. The story will be plodding along with its El Generico, soulless, creepy, dead-eyed characters.
That's all the beginning and the end of the universe!
Then we'll just suddenly turn back to Tom and Jerry just so they can remind us they're still in the movie.
Why are you still here?
But then we're back to watching the zombie thriller, creepy underground YouTube version of Willy Wonka. Ugh. The only plus to this movie I could find? Well, the background chocolate river looks more like chocolate than the 70s live-action version. I mean, just look at that river, it's a very nice river. But that's certainly not the greatest achievement for 2017 Warner Brothers animation. Tom and Jerry Willy Wonka stinks like rotten cheese. It's bad, it's stupid, the plot turns make no sense. I question if the people who wrote the movie even watched the original movie. It's just bad. And it definitely deserves a place among the worst Tom and Jerry movies. And for the second best, Tom and Jerry Blast Off to Mars. I'm a bit of a sap when it comes to concepts like sci-fi, aliens, and space. The idea of Tom and Jerry going to Mars really appealed to me. That's a relatively original movie. And the core concept is there. The Tom and Jerry skits are funny again. And I like how they use the scenery of Mars and space to do their skits. But interestingly, some of the skits this time take a bit of a slower pace. They had more of a build-up this time, expecting a bit of patience from the kids, and I like to see that. When Tom and Jerry try to create their own original movie that isn't just relying on them interacting with other popular characters, I feel like they get very tongue-in-cheek and clever. When you're the 12th sequel to an already 60-year-old franchise, a little bit of self-awareness is in order.
Science has shown that cats harbor an instinctive dislike for mice and rodents in general.
Good thinking, Dr. Gluckman.
And from the get-go, I really liked the sound effects in this one. They're meaty, toony, and really add to the comedic skits. Much like Nutcracker, the primary focus here seems to be on getting the chemistry between Tom and Jerry just right. The story in this one's pretty simple. They stow away in a rocket and land on Mars, resulting in a whole lot of variety. Blast Off to Mars is a Tom and Jerry movie that feels like it's trying to be its own thing. Yeah, when you get a Tom and Jerry in space movie, some parts are going to be cliche, but personally, I like this Tom and Jerry movie just fine. And before we get to number 1, just a couple of quick honourable mentions. Tom and Jerry Wizard of Oz. I've mentioned this one before, but upon looking back on it, I think I was a bit too harsh on it. Although it did have its share of annoying moments, it had a lot of good parody content too, and it was very self-aware. It's refreshingly tongue-in-cheek. Overall, I've changed my mind and think this one's okay. Tom and Jerry, Robin Hood, and his Merry Mouse. Buried in this one, actually, is some really good Tom and Jerry skits. I really like their sword fighting scene with the water wheel. But unfortunately, the main focus seems to be, well, in my opinion, a pretty cookie-cutter bland Robin Hood. Once again, Tom and Jerry just feel more in the background every 10 minutes or so. But on the occasions where they were on screen alone, I really did enjoy how they made use of the fantasy setting in their skits. Tom and Jerry's Spy Quest. I'm sorry, I just couldn't get into this one. The dialogue feels like a major step down this time.
Well, I'm definitely not in the mood for barbecue.
And jeebus, Johnny's delivery in particular just annoys me. It just sounds so cliche to me. The animation looks great though. And having Tom and Jerry just tag along on a secret spy mission makes for some very varied, interesting settings. It's a visual spectacle, but jeebus, I didn't like the writing on this one.
I can smell it from here.
That's not dinner.
And the number 1 worst Tom and Jerry movie is Tom and Jerry Back to Oz. Oh, this one was a chore to watch. It's just everything I don't like about these cheap rehashed Tom and Jerry movies. Except all the charm of the original Tom and Jerry Wizard of Oz movie has just been wiped out. Also wiped out of Back to Oz is a whole lot of Oz, for that matter. In fact, this movie has barely anything to do with Return to Oz. Instead of screaming heads, we get farm lawsuits. I mean, those farm lawsuits are just so dang fascinating to the kids, aren't they? You see, the businessman files a lawsuit, claiming that the Twister released some of the Gale pigs who then plundered his prize watermelon patch. Did you find that sentence as boring as I did? Well, imagine how the kids at home are feeling. I mean, the big, bad, legitimate barbecue businessman wants to offer people meat at the fair. What an evil villain.
I'm running a big booth at the Kansas State Fair.
I mean, what, are the entire cast vegans this time? I mean, this doesn't seem like a real villain. Maybe they just don't like chicken nuggets. I don't know.
So I'm willing to take my payment in livestock.
Oh, you awful little troll.
I mean, I'm sorry to drive this home, but we literally see Tom scarfing down a chicken in the other movies. Anyway, the original 1985 Return to Oz was freaking fascinating. I love that story. The Yellow Brick Road was in rubble, and the entire Emerald City was in ruin. Dorothy had to return to stop an evil empire that had taken over Oz. That's an awesome story. But here, we spend a good portion of the movie back in Kansas, learning about Dorothy's farm. Woo! And how they protect the farm against the wind. Slow down, you're getting too exciting for me.
Well, this brilliant invention of mine will generate enough wind to blow that twister right back where it came from.
Oh wait, we got like 4 whole seconds of Tom and Jerry there. But then we're treated to a song by Dorothy. Rejoice?
I've seen many different faces, the most exotic places.
I mean, she seems fine. I just don't get how the kids are meant to be fascinated by starting the story on 20 minutes of barn life. This time, Tom and Jerry are completely sidelined for minor characters. A more appropriate title might be Dorothy doing boring stuff in Kansas and going to the fair, also featuring some Tom and Jerry scenes. Maybe. Possibly. Now we're hearing about how they're remortgaging the fricking farm. Where is Oz?
There's nothing we can do but go into town and remortgage the farm. Again.
So eventually, even the monkey henchmen get bored and forcefully carry Dorothy off to the main story. Fly, my pretties. Fly! Sometimes we might see Tom and Jerry in the movie, maybe, occasionally, but most of the time, I forget they're even in the movie and just think I'm watching one of those bargain bin budget mockbuster fairy tales. No, we've got to put all that time into exposition dialogue about reuniting home brand I Can't Believe It's Not Oz characters. The animation for this one feels soulless and lazy as well. The colors feel obnoxiously oversaturated, and even the voice actors feel like they're phoning it in.
There's gotta be a way out of this.
Come on, everybody. Think. Use your brains.
But worst of all is that hideous tractor with that stupid uncanny face. Ugh, it just represents everything that annoys me in cheap kids animation. The songs feel awkward, clumsy, drawn out, and just seem to go on forever. Characters move in a plasticky, robotic fashion too. Sometimes I don't even bother to animate characters at all. Look at these background characters. They are literally a backdrop. I hate to say it, but at least I kinda sorta gave a crap with Tom and Jerry Willy Wonka. At least I was fascinated by how terrible it was. This is just too dull and generic for me to even care. Tom and Jerry's Back to Oz was the most painfully long Tom and Jerry movie I ever sat through. I can comfortably call it the #1 worst Tom and Jerry movie. And I think the #1 best Tom and Jerry movie is Fast and the Furry. Yowza, I was not expecting this. This movie is good. Like, way better than a Tom and Jerry rehash movie has any right to be. Joseph Barbera is back, with a vengeance. Mr. Barbera made this movie at 95 years old. That is determination to your craft. In fact, Mr. Barbera made this movie a year before he died. You can't match that kind of passion. I mean, how incredible was this guy? Once again, my respects, sir. The story's basically that Tom and Jerry enter a race to win a new house after being evicted from their old house. But the skits are still a good amount of the focus. And the film actually feels completely original. There's not specifically key characters here they have to shoehorn in. The movie will just go off and do its own thing, leaving Tom and Jerry behind. But it feels like an authentic Hanna-Barbera Cartoon Network movie that I'm interested in. Just from the announcers of the race alone, there's great satire here.
It looks like the network has taken a liking to a certain pussycat.
You can tell the team behind this one was having fun making it, trying to make it stand on its own feet whether it has Tom and Jerry or not. They knew they'd get a lukewarm reception for being a Tom and Jerry rehash movie, but they put their all into making this a colourful, visual and verbal treat at the same time. The dialogue is smart, the writing's smart. Whether the race is taking them in the Amazonian jungle or the Antarctic, there's tons of jokes taking advantage of every setting they're in. And we get a ton of familiar voices. Johnny Bravo's in there.
Steve Tuckley at your service.
Trez MacNeille from The Simpsons is in there.
Hi! I'm Mallory from Watertown, Wisconsin. But everyone just calls me Soccer Mom.
Hell, even Bender and Zap Brannigan are in there.
I have an idea on how to juice your show up and pull your polka-dotted keister out of the fire.
Bite my shiny metal ass.
And who's this cute little fella?
And of course, Robert Paulson, aka Yakko.
We are still looking for one more contestant to round out the field for the fabulous super race.
Even Tom Kenny from SpongeBob's in here.
I curse your souls, mortals!
I know I'm turning this into a guess that voice actor game, but I just dig all these voice actors. And once again, I appreciate how tongue-in-cheek and self-aware this movie is. It feels like something you get out of a good Simpsons episode. I remember every single competing and minor character. They all feel fresh and vibrant, and they all have their own unique quirks. I can safely say it's pretty likely that both kids and adults might enjoy Fast and the Furry.
Remember, JW, when in doubt, always stoop as low as you can and appeal to people's basest instincts.
I definitely had the most fun with this Tom and Jerry movie. It was fresh, it was interesting, I loved the characters, Tom and Jerry skits were good. It felt like a warm acknowledgement of the original Tom and Jerry cartoons, while also being an entertaining Cartoon Network-style original movie of its own. I personally think Fast and the Furry is the #1 best Tom and Jerry movie. Well, thanks for checking out these Tom and Jerry movies with me. Tom and Jerry has been a staple of television for years, and in the hands of someone who actually cares about these characters, these movies can really reflect an understanding of what people like about the cat and mouse duo. While I do suspect that the days of good Tom and Jerry movies are behind us, there's no reason I can't still appreciate the movies that William Hanna and Joseph Barbera left behind. And my respects go to all the team members who saw these movies as more than just a Tom and Jerry rehash, and really tried to make them special. And if you have a personal opinion on these Tom and Jerry movies yourself, feel free to leave your own thoughts in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.